rewrite level, and you can then lower the level by, say, I don't know, 5, for example, and that means you can increase the other level by 5.
Okay, so you've got to keep a balance of it, essentially.
Yeah, you keep a balance and you can tailor it to your ways. And I mean, there's an achievement to get 99 of either the Life Force or the Red Force, and I applaud anyone who's got that, because it's as I say, I've put maybe 20 or 30 hours in, and I'm about 38 on the red scale, the soul bit, and about 15 on the blue scale. I'm kind of going for like a red build at the moment. And I've every time I've been doing it, I've just been sacrificing, and it's getting to a point where it's not doing much other than if I was to sacrifice the bosses, which gave you kind of a whole lot more of the soul sacrifice points.
I don't feel guilty about sacrificing things, because when I notice you save things, they kind of turn back into what they used to be before they were corrupted, like little bunny rabbits and birds. I was thinking, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, one of the typical enemies you fight is called an orc. I mean, it's not like the World of Warcraft orc at all. It's basically
like a giant slug cat.
A giant deformed cat, yeah. Almost like the Cheshire Cat on...
Yeah, and they vomit on you, and they're not very pleasant.
Yeah. And they vomit on you, and they jump on you and stuff, and they've got many more legs than they should have. But when you kill them, there's like a little cat just lying kind of in pain on the floor. And also, if you're a cat lover, you're going to save it, and the cat kind of gets up and springs away, and it lives happily ever after. But you can sacrifice it, and the cat dies, but you get a portion of the power that it once held. And that translates over to the big bosses, because as I mentioned before, the big bosses are the sorcerers who then come corrupt.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, I've fought 3 of them now in my time, and I've killed every single one of them.
Yep. As you kill the sorcerers, as you defeat the bosses, you see the sorcerers, or even the people, because sometimes they're just normal people. I mean, I'll get to that in a second. And then you get the choice to either save them, or, as you say, sacrifice them. Now, if you sacrifice them, obviously you get a lot of the points, and as your sorcerer, your character, or the Ghostbuster, as it were, your duty is to find these monsters and sacrifice them. That is your sacred duty. You're not supposed to save them. And there are times where if you actually save them, you get kind of heckled by your teammates, like, why are you saving these people? It's our duty to be kind of just and to kill them.
I've got to say, though, in the portion of the game I've played, I've been teamed up with a woman.
Yep.
And my God, these characters are so fucking wooden. It's unbelievable. It's just almost unbearable. I think one of the reasons I haven't maybe played on it more, as much as it's always dragged me back with it's kind of like with its interesting premise, is that I just don't want to listen to this bullshit in between the fights. I mean, Christ Almighty, this woman, she's like such a ridiculous kind of, I don't know, stock character. She's the frosty rival who warms to you over the course of several missions. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, just bang and get it over with, man.
Yep. That's what it's leading to, isn't it? It's like every kind of terrible Hollywood movie. But as I say, if you save the person, very often than not, they become an ally, and then you can then choose them to help you out in other missions later on in the game. So saving doesn't really have that much bad connotations to it. I mean, it's very rare, unless you kind of want to keep it at an absolute minimum, that saving a boss character is going to increase the level to such a high extent that you're going to level up. So I wouldn't be worried too much about that, but if you're like me and you kind of want a roster of all these kind of teammates to play with you, then by all means you can go back and you can save them. And it's interesting because... Yeah,
I didn't know that, actually. I thought the bosses, once you'd killed them, they were kind of set in stone.
Some of them are that are kind of, paramount to the story. Like, for example, the girl you're talking about, she's called Sortiara, I believe.
Yes.
When you are fighting her later on in the game, you have to sacrifice her. If you revive her,
don't I know that? Jesus Christ.
You save her.
Yeah, I was like...
You fell for her charms, didn't you? That's exactly
I know, I fell in love with her wonderful personality.
I fell in love with her, I thought, no, let's run away into the sunset. She's like, no, fuck you, and she just punched me in the face.
Yeah, I was like, it did not explain that at all. It did not say you must kill her. It said, do you want to sacrifice her, or do you want to save her? I was like, you know what, we're starting to warm up to each other. I'm not even quite sure why we're fighting in the first place. I'm going to save her. And she just stands back up with full health and is like, fuck you, sorcerer boy.
Yep.
And then proceeds to pummel the shit out of me with ice.
Absolutely. So there are some times where it has to be done, but more often than not, if you save a character, they'll come available to you later on, and they'll help you out. And some of them do have quite interesting and helpful abilities. Some of them are just shit, and you think, I'm going to go back and kill you just out of spite. And it has an impact. So if I was to save a particular boss character, he would then become available in my roster. But then if I was to go back and sacrifice him, they would then not be available. And also, the story arc would change in a certain aspect because that person is no longer alive. And that means that other monsters wouldn't become available and I'd be assigned to another mission.
Well, doesn't the Librum, is that what it's called? The book?
Yep, Librum.
Doesn't he actually say that certain pages can be altered, despite this being kind of like annals of history? They can be altered depending on your own choices.
Yep. A lot of the pages can be altered. I mean, I think the main story is pretty much set in stone, but there's separate stories called Fellow Sorcerers, which are, I think, 4 stories to do with 4 other sorcerers. For example, there's a guy called Carnatax who's just got an obsession with gold. There's a story with a werewolf guy, which is actually quite interesting, actually.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I'm towards the end of that one. And then you've got another one called Avalon Pax, which is a separate kind of rehash of basically the main story. Uses the same levels and the same monsters, but it does change up a little bit. Like, it gives you missions to find secret hidden soul shards, or to sacrifice or save a monster. And if you were to sacrifice a monster, another kind of branch would be available. But if you would save that monster, then the order who looks after the Ghostbusters, as it were. I don't know why I keep referring to as Ghostbusters.
Were you watching Ghostbusters at the weekend?
I could have been. As you save these people, the Order then sent other sorcerers after you, because you've kind of gone against their will. So then you have to fight other kind of human characters, as it were.
Yeah, I was going to say that in the early bits when you're saving like potential like monster sorcerers who you've been sent to dispatch and kill yourself. I was thinking it would be a cool thing if other sorcerers came hunting for you.
Yep, they do, and you can use kind of the sorcerers that you saved to kind of back you up, as it were, which is quite interesting. I mean, those fights are not really too hard. I mean, you could probably solo them, but there's nothing wrong with having kind of a wingman, as it were, just to kind of give the enemy a bit more grief.
Yeah.
And a lot of the enemies do kind of get a bit pile-on kind of mentality, and they just want to jump all over you. So if you have someone there to kind of take some of the aggro, it's quite handy for you to kind of concentrate on one character at a time, or one boss at a time.
Yeah, I found that as well. If when Sortia... Sortiara, right? When she's with you, she really takes the heat off you.
Yeah,
just stabbing things in the back constantly.
A lot of them do actually function as pretty well kind of partner characters, and some of them are rubbish. They take one hit and they die. You just think, fuck you, I'm sacrificing you. But others,
because when your partners die, or go down, as it were,
yep,
that you can actually run up to them and save them or sacrifice them, and if you save them, you sacrifice half your health.
Current health, yeah.
And if you sacrifice them, you fucking kill them.
If you sacrifice, you kill them, but you also unleash their Black Rite, which is kind of a huge area of affectability, which kind of decimates pretty much anything on that level.
Yes, and you can also perform these, can't you? But you're essentially sacrificing a part of your body, and it's a semi-permanent sacrifice, essentially. So the one I've unlocked is this giant firestorm attack, but it essentially burns my arm to uselessness.
Yeah, this is the other gameplay mechanic called Black Rite. So what you do at the beginning of a level, you can select a part of your body to sacrifice in the case of emergency, as it were. Can you imagine on your leg, like, split just for an emergency?
Break glass.
Yeah, I mean, the one you refer to, I can't remember the name, but you sacrifice your skin, and as you enable the ability, you get enveloped in flames, and this huge kind of fire demon bursts out and then kind of lets out a huge roar and a huge kind of, as I say, blast to anything kind of nearby, and it will probably make Swiss cheese of most, if not all, bosses around that level that you get it. But then as you progress through the game, you get different kind of body parts that you can sacrifice. For example, I've got one, I believe it's my arm, and if I sacrifice my arm, it covers the enemies in thorns and it holds them down, and as it does that, it leaves them open to kind of other people to attack, which is quite interesting, because you can kind of hold big bosses down if they're kind of running about or teleporting and stuff.
Yeah.
And it gives you or your partners the ability to kind of use some of the bigger, more powerful moves to take them down. And there's other ones later on in the game, and it just gives you kind of another incentive to kind of develop and build your character and try these new materials out, because, as I say, you've got kind of quite a wide range of moves.
Yeah, because the combat itself is actually quite interesting in that you have essentially 6 slots to equip various spells in. Where you have 3 of those spells available at any one time, and you can cycle between two pallets of 3, essentially using the right trigger. But you can, like, basically each spell you have is assigned to, was it square, triangle, and circle on the Vita pad. And if you see you press square, you've got this. One of the abilities I had was like an ice sword. You'll essentially summon this ice sword, and then you'll have various attacks associated with that ice sword. And then when you finish with that, you can press the R trigger again, the R shoulder button, and it kind of dispels it and lets you go back into your palettes and summon new abilities.
Yep. I mean, there's a finite number of spells you can use within any level. And if you were to use them all completely, then that spell is no longer available until that level's finished. And even after the level's finished, you have to spend what's known as Lycra, I think it's called.
Is that the dew you get off the
yep.
book?
Yeah, the book cries, which is it's very strange. I've never seen a character cry that gives you ability, but when you speak to the book, you say, "Hello, have you checked for any drops recently?" And you kind of wipe away his tears. I mean, he says quite clearly they're not tears, but we all know the difference.
Yeah, he's hurting inside, really.
He's hurting inside all these kind of tragic sort of sacrifices and deaths and everything.
When I logged into the game this evening, he actually reminded me to check for tears because it'd been a few days.
he does. He was like, "Have you checked for droplets recently?" And then as you get them, it's like a currency, and you use that to spend to either recharge your abilities, revive any characters that have died in battle, like your partner characters, or if you sacrifice yourself with the Black Rite. Sorry, this is the thing with Black Rite. As you sacrifice yourself, for example, you can sacrifice your skin, your defense goes down.
Yeah,
so
you
that's
really
kind of,
become vulnerable. Because I'm sure the first mission you get, the first Black Rite, I used it, and the boss didn't die. And I had still a lot of health, but she hit me once with a glancing blow, and I was on my fucking arse.
Yep. It's kind of very risk versus reward. So as you use a Black Rite, although it's brilliant and it looks great, it puts you on such a kind of weak point. It puts you on such a kind of handicap. But the Lycra that you get from the book will enable you to kind of reset that and repay the debt. It's called the debt, actually. It allows you to repay the soul debt or the Black Rite debt, and then you get your defense back or you get your attack ability back, etc., etc. And it's just an interesting way to kind of play the game. As you say, risk reward, you get these kind of teardrops. But again, as you say, it's a very much Japanese kind of idea. I don't think you'd ever see this from kind of Microsoft Game Studios or
no, it's incredibly Japanese, and it's very macabre, and it has that. I also often think Japan does like just kind of grim, desolate atmospheres very well.
It does.
They really they rarely ever pull back and inject some like happiness into these type of things, and this game does feel very much like that. There's not a lot of kind of joy in it. All the characters I've met are really nasty to each other for arbitrary reasons.
Yeah.
Like, the situation you find yourself in the beginning of the game as a prisoner of this kind of... It almost feels like something out of fucking Hellraiser.
It does. You know what? I was actually going to make that kind of comparison, but it does. It's very kind of grim, very kind of hellbound.
Yeah, the whole thing is that you're going around sacrificing fucking souls to become powerful enough that you can kill this crazy fucking sorcerer. It's just dark, and there's not a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. And I've got a horrible feeling as well. There's 3 different endings to this game, and I've got a horrible feeling not many of them are very good, like in terms of very good for your character's prospects.
I'll have to see which ending I get. I mean, I think I'm nearly there yet, but it's a trial. It's a trial sometimes. I definitely... This isn't the game that I want to spend maybe 3-4 hours on it at a time just because I get so frustrated at it. I definitely want to kind of pick it up, play a little bit and put it down.
Yeah, and I think the fact that those the tier mechanic, is the fact that it's a very central currency. I think if you were to sit down and play this for extended periods of time, the way you get that Do you get more tiers, or is it a time-related thing?
I think it's
Because
the more you play in a session, the more tiers you get. Like, so if I was
right,
to play 3 hours and then check the book after 3 hours, I'd get say 60 points. If I was to check it every 10 minutes for 3 hours, I'll get maybe 25, or it wouldn't be as much as it were.
see, it seems to almost reward you, from what I can tell, for not playing as such. It seems to almost encourage you to take a break, so you don't waste up all your resources, and then when you
Yep.
come back in like 12 hours real time, he's going to have that 12 hours worth
Yeah,
of tiers.
yeah. I mean, he'll always have some tiers ready for you if you leave him for a while, which is interesting. You know, if you need some tiers because you're running low, put the game down for a bit, go and do some stuff, come back, and you're ready to go again.
Yeah, it seems to be a game very much designed for the long haul. It
Yep.
almost feels like an MMO without being online, and the fact that it's more akin to being
It
it's
does.
more geared towards being a portable title that you can pick up and play.
Yep. But
It's,
there is.
it's
Uh,
unusual.
It is,
So-
but I mean, it's interesting you say that MMO because it does have a very strong kind of multiplayer online aspect to it. You can team up in groups of four, and the Avalon packs that I mentioned before, you undertake those, and you basically, it's just as I say, the bosses from the main game, but you could take them down with kind of friends or just people online. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because the bosses are a lot harder, as you would imagine, because, you know, there's 4 times of people. They're about, you know, maybe 3-4 times as hard.
They've
And it's
done the
interesting.
raid boss versions of them.
Exactly, it's like the MMO World of Warcraft kind of raid boss versions. I think the rewards are almost the same, but it's interesting because you want to kind of do it with other people just to see how they react, and obviously because they're a lot more better than, you know, the computer control characters. So if you're having trouble with a particular pact, as it were, stick it online. Get 2 or 3 people to come on, help you out, get it done, get your reward, and off you go. Kind of continue on to the next story mission or the next other mission. So
No,
it's
out
good.
of interest actually, because I haven't unlocked this online portion of the game. I haven't played it that much, but is this actually online and you can join kind of random lobbies, or do you have to have friends playing this?
Both. You can have friends, you can have private lobbies, or you can join random lobbies.
Oh, good.
There isn't really much of a level cap, so if you're having trouble with a very early stage, you can get a level 99 guy come and help you out, absolutely no problem, which I think is good. And
Taller than
obviously,
you, no doubt.
absolutely, and obviously there are much harder packs to undertake, and obviously the high level guys are pretty much only going to be choosing people who are around their level to do that.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's, as I say, if you're having trouble with a particular pact, by all means go online, start a real lobby. I was on it maybe last week, and there was close to maybe 15-20 people, maybe more than that, just ready to go. So there's always going to be people on there, always people ready to play with you. There isn't going to be kind of even though this game, is quite old, nearly a year old, there isn't kind of a dying community. It's still quite strong.
It's incredibly strong in Japan. This was one of the biggest selling Vita games ever in Japan.
Yeah, I had to look at the figures, and I was quite impressed. I didn't realise it sold that well, actually.
Yeah, it's
but
sold like nearly 500,000 in a few weeks in Japan.
Yeah, I think you can actually play with the Japanese players because a lot of the names had kind of very Japanese sounding connotations to them. Or they might have just been kind of Japanese American people.
Yeah.
What else? The other thing I'd like to kind of mention is the story. Not so much the story, the main story. I mean, that is. I think me and Ben have got mixed feelings towards that, but in many very ways it's quite strange. But a lot of the strength of the story comes from the lore aspect. Now, the lore aspect is the background to each of the bosses and the monster characters. So one of the bosses.
Maybe that's why I'm not that impressed with the story, because I actually haven't got into it. I've certainly seen it on the book that you can read
Yep.
it, but I haven't actually gone into it yet.
I think you fought the that big fat chicken thing. I can't remember.
Oh, the harpy.
The harpy. That's it. God, I'm terrible at this. You fought the harpy. If you go back and there's an option under Librum, or under called Law.
Yes, it unlocked when I turned it on.
Yep.
That's how fucking early in the game I am.
And you from there, you can then kind of look at the boss characters and the way it kind of talks about them and how kind of the monsters first came to be. It's really interesting, and I mean the art behind it is really well done as well. And for example, the harpy, to kind of give you an idea, she was a very large woman who would go to market and buy kind of sweets and cakes. And one day she just meets this very attractive guy, but she's not happy with herself. So she then makes a deal with the devil almost, and she kind of becomes more attractive. She goes to find this guy, and she can't find him, I believe, and it has an impact on her because then she kind of begins to have this hunger that she once had, but then she realizes the hunger for the food isn't enough, and then she kind of becomes this huge harpy monster. And as you kind of fight the harpy monster, I don't know if you noticed, but kind of text and words come on screen, and she says stuff like, I'm so lonely, and it's kind of the woman.
I noticed that. It happens on all the different bosses, though, doesn't it?
It does. As you fight the bosses, the kind of human side of them comes through. So she's like, I'm so lonely. Why does nobody love me? As you kind of, beating the shit out of her, and it's interesting. It's quite kind of again haunting and quite scary to kind of see that even though this big scary monster has got this huge ability and all this huge kind of attack animations and huge wingspan, is flying down, is coming to grab you and kill you. It's still got something almost yelling out inside, saying "Help me, free me." And it just makes that decision at the end to either save or sacrifice. I guess that much harder if you kind of pay attention to it.
I agree with you in principle. I do think it is an interesting idea. I just think that it's badly presented. I think again it comes back to the hammy voice acting.
I think if they spent a lot more time maybe not letting people go through and finding it for themselves. Because, as I say, this is something you don't really get introduced to this. You have to kind of take it upon yourself to go away and have a look through it. I was just impressed because I was just looking through it all. I think I only had a couple of minutes to spare, and I didn't really want to get started on a boss character, so I was just looking at the other stuff. And I just read kind of the story of the Harpy, and I was just quite impressed with it. And there is kind of a lot of thought process going into it. And as I was reading it and just remembering the fight and the stuff that was being said and yelled out to me, it kind of came together, and it was interesting. But as you say, if you weren't to touch that, it just takes so much away from the story, and it just seems really wooden.
It's just a big kind of marionette chicken thing that you're fighting that seems to scream in just strange humanized things at you at random. I think though it comes back into its Japanese roots, because Dark Souls did that as well, in that it kept all the lore and story and the deeper story at arm's reach, out of arm's reach even, and you really had to go looking for it and thinking about it. Whereas this does it in a less subtle way and a less grand way, but it certainly is hidden slightly beneath the surface, as it were. But again, I think the trouble is, I'm never really that inspired to go and looking into it, because the worst part of this game, from what I've seen, is the general presentation. I think the characters are annoying, and it doesn't really make me want to delve too far into it. I just want to get on with the next fight. And from what I've played, maybe it'll change as I get more into it, but I much prefer the action and the RPG elements than the overall presentation. I didn't really give a shit what was going on. But again, that might change as I get into it. Maybe I'll get into the lore a bit more.
As you say, you're quite kind of early on into it, and you never know. It probably just take a little thing just to kind of make you sit back and think, oh wow, this is quite interesting. I'll read a bit more about it. But as I say, I think it's really well done. But again, it's not really good in terms of if you want to kind of get the player to kind of keep on playing early on in the game. It doesn't really drag you in. It kind of, it's a bit of a task just to keep playing and playing and playing and playing until you kind of get a bit out of it. And games shouldn't be like that. They should try and, hook you from the get-go in terms of story, not only on gameplay as well. Because with me, if the story is no good, I don't think I really want to continue playing, because the gameplay just seems very weak. And it's kind of a throwback to kind of the retro days where, the story was weak because, the graphics and the gameplay was just really basic. But because we're very complicated now, I think you deserve a lot more.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. So yeah, we've talked quite a lot. Well, you've talked more than I have, because I'm a bit of a soul sacrifice noob still. But if you had to give this a rating, and you do, so what would you give it?
I would give this a B. Not B minus, because the gameplay is quite addictive. As I say, you do find yourself kind of taking a moment away every now and then, and just spending time and doing a monster here, doing a monster there, maybe going online, getting someone to help you out. It does kind of creep on you in that way. Definitely not a B plus, because, as I said, the story element is quite wooden. The AI does do a lot, but then the story the voice acting behind it is just awful. Um, you do have to spend a lot of time before you start getting kind of a lot of satisfaction out of the game. So that is probably my biggest driving factor to give it a B.
Well, I mean, I said I was going to refrain from giving it a rating, and I am. But from what you're saying and from what I've experienced, I'd probably agree with you. Maybe a point or two either way. Probably more towards the negative. But then again, it might change if I played it more. But I'm inclined to agree with what you're saying in your rating there. This doesn't seem like a top tier game, but it certainly has a certain quality that does make it. It's almost greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Nothing about it is particularly standout, but it's just something that kind of gets into your skin and keeps calling you back to play it. Maybe it's the Librum actually, getting inside my head or something. I don't know. But,
it is quite interesting just for a game to kind of not get you straight away, but just to grow on you after a while. I mean, there's not many games that if I'm not interested straight away, I'm going to give it another chance. But I'm glad I did with this, and I would absolutely recommend everyone just to play this. Not for the story so much, probably just the gameplay, because you will find yourself coming back to it every now and then, spending some time on it, and from then on, it will just kind of develop into you, and you'll eventually, here we go, sacrifice some time.